probably one of the biggest warnings that I'm giving a lot lately is to avoid the pitfalls of spiritual consumerism. And what I mean by spiritual consumerism is part of the beauty of modern Orthodoxy is that we have so much available. I mean, there's so many icons, there's so many books, there are podcasts, there are YouTube channels, there are so many sources of good information. But it's really easy to take the wrong approach with this. I kind of liken this to somebody who wants to take up mountain climbing. And what they do is they buy all the necessary tools for climbing mountains. They buy guidebooks. They buy all the things that they need to wear. They buy all the equipment it takes. They buy all the energy drinks. They buy all the food that they'll need to really climb a mountain. And they stick it all in a backpack and they go, okay, now I'm going to go climb a mountain. Well, now instead of actually helping you climb the mountain, it's just going to weigh you down. What you need to do is you need to take those things and actually utilize them. You need to read the books carefully. You need to go practice. You need to consume those energy bars and drinks and things like that. You need to do the proper preparation exercise. You need to actually engage with it. And Orthodoxy today lends itself to this almost new danger that we haven't seen in the face of the history of the church before, that because we have so much available, some people are coming in and they're consuming as much as possible and taking in more and more and more and more. They want to make sure that they're always listening to something new. They're always being interested by some new book or new podcast. But what you're doing there is you're actually taking the nous, the mind that's so scattered, and you're just scattering it in a so-called Orthodox direction. But you're never actually going before your prayer corner and constraining it and focusing it and actually praying. You're never actually utilizing the things that you're learning. So it's better to go in more slowly. I realize I say this a little bit ironically because in my own videos, both in my office and when I do them at my house, I have a wall that's absolutely covered with icons behind me and I have books all over the place. But I've learned over time that just getting more things doesn't help my faith one bit. I need to take in little by little and then go apply it. And if I'm not praying at least as much as I'm listening to things or reading things, I'm making a huge mistake. We need to apply what we're learning. Again, I'm saying this a little bit ironically because people are going to be watching this online. But if I could create, a little clip for a short, what I would create is this. If you have time to watch this, have you prayed? If not, as soon as this is done, go turn it off and go pray. We need to do that. We need to take what we're learning and actually put it into use rather than just building up more and more knowledge, because that's dangerous. We can actually end up becoming worse because of that. We become more arrogant and prideful because we think we know so much, but we're not becoming more humble. We're not becoming more repentant. We're not becoming more loving. So whatever it is that we're taking in, we need to then take a breather and go apply it and pray. And really, the core of our faith, both in quantity and quality, should be our prayer life. Everything should be aiming towards improving our prayer life. If it's not, we're becoming spiritual consumerists, and that's not going to help us in the end. We need to put everything into practice and to put it in practice well, consciously, deliberately, and humbly. So don't worry about always keeping yourself interested, because what happens when you come across the day when suddenly you can't find a podcast that interests you, you can't find a YouTube video that you haven't watched before, you can't find a book that doesn't grab your attention. This is when people fall away from the faith. They haven't actually embedded things in their heart. We need to understand that every Christian needs to spend a little time in the desert. If you can't go into the desert of the world, you go into the desert of your heart. And the Orthodox Christian needs to spend a little time in that desert every single day. This is where we deepen the faith. And this is why, going back to that video from Father Roman Braga, God is not in books, he says, the cell taught, he doesn't say it in that particular video, but he says elsewhere, the cell taught him everything. When he left after 3 years in isolation, nearly 3 years of solitary confinement, the last thing he did was he turned around and faced the room and did a prostration and kissed the ground, and then he left. He says that the cell, which had windows so high he couldn't even look through them, he had nothing. He says no pencil, not even a piece of paper, no books, nothing. He discovered himself by going deep within his heart. We need that desert. So we need to take all these, yes, these things are, I'm not saying they're not beautiful, they're not good, they're not beneficial. All these podcasts, all this media, all these books, they're all wonderful. But we need to utilize them properly, which means utilize them to learn, to deepen your faith, and then go live it. And spend, again, at least as much time in the desert of your heart at your prayer corner as you are consuming Orthodox materials.
How much of this does fellowship help facilitate? Is that important, having a strong community that also engages in prayer, and maybe you have a close friend that also you guys get together and read scripture? Does any of that play a role here?
Yeah, I think that fellowship is incredibly important because we're weak and we're creatures of habit. And so we're easily going to fall back into old habits, into a secularist way of living, if we don't have others that we can view and be inspired by. At the same time, some of this is really a question that comes down to personality. So I have a personality that I tend to be more introverted. I always have a few really close friends, but I don't need a huge amount of friends that I'm talking to every single day. The really close friends I have, I talk to them periodically every now and then. But some people really need a lot more social interaction. They need, just because, again, of their personality, they need a lot more of that connection. No matter which personality you are, you need to have it available. You need to make sure that it's available, especially at the beginning, because we need to be encouraged by others, and we need to know that we are going to have just those off days. You are going to have those times where you're tempted just to go back to a lazy kind of thoughtless way of living, where life is happening to us rather than us living life. And suddenly we forget about prayer and fasting, or we're just not interested in those things at the moment. That's going to happen. And having that encouragement, I think, is really beneficial.